Hey, what's going on? So this video I'm going to try to do my best to explain how to adapt the Skunk2 Ultra Street Manifold for the Miata, how to take it and use it on a front wheel drive BP. So the first thing I'm going to say is if you're planning on doing this with a stock ECU, it's probably going to be a pain in the ass, mainly because of the throttle body. This is made to accept a Miata throttle body, meaning that you have to use the Miata idle air control valve and the Miata throttle positioning sensor. So if you're putting this on like a stock Escort or an Escort with a stock TPS, I guess if you're using like a GTR swap or GTX swap, it might work because I think the throttle positioning sensor is the same. But I don't know for sure. I just know that for the BP05, the throttle positioning sensor is just like an on-off switch, and it's not going to work with the Miata TPS sensor. So you'd have to find a way to adapt, or you'd have to find a way to adapt the Escort TPS sensor to the Miata throttle body. So, anyways, the Escort shaft for the TPS is like a D shape. So, and the Miata throttle body is a blade. So they're two different types to adapt to the sensor. So, but you know, in my case, I'm using a standalone. I'm using a Mega Squirt, so I could use any throttle positioning sensor imaginable. The issue I ran into is the throttle positioning sensor I was using. It was a variable throttle positioning sensor, but it accepted the D shape. So I had to get kind of creative with the mounting. Basically, I ended up having to take the flange or the blade on the. I'll just show you. So, anyways, this is the BMW throttle positioning sensor. This is typically what the Miata guy, like the 1.6 liter Miata guys use. They use this with a adapter to adapt it to the 1.6 throttle body, which is like the Escort GT throttle body. It's a D-shaped shaft for the TPS. So I don't want to spend $96 on a new Miata throttle positioning sensor, so I'm going to repurpose this one. So basically what I did in order to make this shape fit onto this is I just took it and I filed down the sides of that ever so slightly so that it actually fits into the flat part of the D. And it seems snug enough that it's not going to move. There's not a whole lot of resistance in this. There's no spring or anything, so there's no reason why there should ever be enough force to cause this to rotate inside of there. It should stay in the flat spot. We'll see. But then the other issue I ran into was, of course, this doesn't mount onto the this guy very well. The holes are too far apart. So one thing I thought about doing was just honestly just drilling and tapping this throttle body to accept this, which I still might end up doing. But I need a drill press to do it, so I won't be doing it now. But basically what I ended up doing to make this fit was I just filed some notches in there. It's kind of ghetto. I know it's pretty ghetto, but it is what it is. It's what I got to work with right now until I find another TPS sensor that fits. It isn't $90. So yes, I am aware of how ghetto this is. Basically just have it so that the screw just barely catches the outside of the sensor and keeps it from rotating. Like I said, it's not my proudest achievement, but you know, yeah, same thing. So basically that's just kind of just barely just barely being held on there. It's sketch, but it shouldn't go anywhere. I can apply a pretty good amount of force. The only thing I'm worried about are these screws backing out, which is very possible. So yeah, I have to figure something out for the throttle body. The second issue is the idle air control valve. So I thought the Escort GT idle air control valve would fit onto the 94-95 throttle body. It does not. So the Skunk2, or if you get one of the eBay throttle bodies, whatever, it comes with a adapter to adapt the idle air control valve to the throttle body. But obviously this idle air control valve does not jive with this, does not fit any of the holes, so that is going to be a no-go on that one. Yeah, so that's not gonna work. So and buying a Miata idle air control valve, yeah, they're like new. If you can find a new one that looks like this, you know, they're but different flange, they are like $900. You can get a used one for like $400, or you can go to a junkyard and try and find one. But yeah, they're stupid expensive. So if you do this and you plan on putting this on a you know, on a BG chassis, on a front wheel drive chassis car, and you want to keep the idle air control valve, I suggest buying, instead of buying the 94-97 throttle body, buy the 99 2000 or 2000 whatever, the later model Miata throttle body, because it comes with an adapter to use this type of idle air control valve. This is the type that's used on the Kia Sophias and the later Miatas. These are $60 new at the parts store. Much cheaper solution, much cleaner solution, because it doesn't use an external pipe to pipe air in. It just uses, like most idle air control valves would do. You have a orifice on the front side of the throttle blade and one on the other side of the blade, so that it just passes air. There's no need for a great big tube going to it. I don't know why they ever thought this was a good idea, but anyways, that's the way the earlier Miatas were in the earlier BGs and whatnot. So I sent an email to Skunk2 hoping they will sell me just the adapter plate to use this. For now, what I'm going to do is just build a block-off plate and run it without an idle air control valve. Shouldn't be too much of a deal. The car doesn't have power steering or AC. The only load on the engine is going to be the fan turning on, or the headlights being turned on, and that's not a significant load. You can use timing-based idle control to take care of that if you have a standalone. So you can just have it dial in more timing to bump the idle speed. So I'm going to try that, and if that doesn't work, and then I'll get the adapter plate for this guy to run the later model style idle air control valve. Now onto the manifold. Alright, so when you get the manifold, it's obviously configured for Miata, which means it's configured for a rear-wheel drive setup. The throttle body is on the wrong side. Luckily, these Ultra Street manifolds, they all have the exact same flange on them. So, and they're reversible to a certain extent, kind of reversible. All the holes line up, but there is a couple of issues. So, the majority of the threads are all in the lower part of the intake, with the exception of the two holes closest to the throttle body. The threads are in the upper part of the plenum, and the bolts are supposed to come through the bottom to bolt that on. And then there's one more, I guess you could call it on the front. Well, if this is on a Miata, it would be the back, but in this case it's going to be on the front of the plenum. But anyways, there's another hole that's in the middle hole that's inside the plenum. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to take a drill and drill out the two holes on the throttle body side so that they're big enough to accept a bolt to go through. And then you're going to have to drill out this hole so that you can put a bolt in from the bottom to catch this. So I'm going to do that really quick before if you buy the plenum spacer, you know, to add more liters to the internal volume of the manifold. The hardware they send you is too short. This is the hardware they send. This is what you need. Put those side by side. You can see they are quite a bit longer. So what you need is they are 6x100 or M6x100. These are 45 millimeter, and then you need 350 millimeter bolts. So the 350 millimeters are because when you drill these out, you're not gonna have anything to bolt. Well, actually, no, that would be fine. It's for the other half. Yeah. So the problem you're gonna run into, since there are no threads in this side, when you turn this around on the other side here, you just have two clean holes. So you got two clean holes here and two clean holes here. So you're gonna have to use a long bolt and a nut to be able to secure the plenum down, because there's no threads in that side. So you're gonna have to drill these out, and then you're gonna have to use some longer bolts to nut the two on. You're gonna have to put a nut on this one, and the middle on the back. So, but yeah, so if you get the spacer for the Miata manifold, the hardware's too short. You're gonna need longer hardware. It's gonna cost you about $20 for the hardware, about 16 maybe. I don't know, 20 to 16 bucks depending on how much your hardware store charges you. So you're gonna need what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So yeah, you're gonna need 7 45 millimeter and then 3 50 millimeter. What's funny is that I have a bench vise. I'm just lazy. I don't like using it. I like using it, but once again, just lazy. So then the two out here, and this guy in the middle. Middle front. Alright. Now those are drilled out. Put our gasket back on. Put our spacer on. The other thing to note about this thing is that the casting on this is kind of, I mean, the casting's fine. The cleanup's kind of shitty, honestly. Like if I were to have paid the full $400 for this thing and pulled it apart, I probably would have been a little. I mean, I guess $400's not that much for a manifold, but I don't know. I just feel like they could have did a little better with, you know, cleaning this up. It's not horrible. Could definitely be better. I may at a later date take it off and polish it and whatnot. You can see a slight difference there. pretty gross in the inside. I haven't gotten down real deep, but this is why I didn't feel like polishing it or porting it, because I knew if I ported it, I was going to want to go all the way with it. So a few more hours and I should have them all done. But yeah, it looks a little better. Alright, so this is like 3 days later from that last video, or the last clip, whatever. I went in there with some like 180 grit and kind of sanded it down. It's not perfect, as you can see. You know, there's still lots of machining or lots of casting left in there, or sand marks. But I did try and polish at least like, you know, the bell part. You know, give it kind of a velocity stack kind of finish, you know. So I don't know, probably better than it was, but may not have been worth it. It's whatever at this point. I'm halfway torn between finishing the job and polishing and just saying screw it. Part of the issue is I can only get so far down in there, and so far I haven't even attempted to get in here. But the problem is the way it makes that immediate dip. I can only get down to about here coming in from the top. You know, if I come in from the top, I can only get down to about here in the top half. And I guess if I can't get this whole section right here. I can get the top part. I can get up here. I can get up here. I can get the beginning, but I won't be able to get down in that neck. So I don't know. I think it's probably fine. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it. Those are weird little scratches there. Every single runner. Anyways, so I'm just gonna call it there to make sure it's nice and super cleaned out, because you don't want any of that abrasive compound left in there. Be a bad time for everyone. So anyways, I'm going to get all this stuff cleaned up and get the intake on the car. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and put this guy back together. So I got my spacer. It's about to come off. The gasket's about to come off. That's lame. So 0.5 liter spacer. Gasket. Make sure you get both your gaskets on. Oh, top half of the plenum. There. Alright, so this is what I was talking about with the two on the back here. These two on the back go all the way through, and you have to put a nut on the other end. I used these little nylocks so that I don't have to worry about them vibrating off. Also, that middle one on the back also needs a nut. The two in the front, I have to use two shorter Allens. These will, you could probably use like just the ones that came in, just the stock ones that came inside the manifold. They're plenty long. One more short one for the middle front. Goes through the bottom. Just for comparison's sake, here's the Skunk2 versus the GTR. You can see the size difference there. These runners are a little thicker. Not a whole lot, but the biggest advantage here is a better plenum design and a larger plenum, more displacement. and larger throttle body opening orifice. So we shall see. I do have to steal a couple of plugs out of here. Oops. Alright, so like I said, I'm only going to use these two. Alright, so there's that. I can go ahead and get my throttle body on. Like I said, with my throttle body, I'm using a block-off plate. I'm not using an actual, don't have a idle valve installed. So yeah, no idle valve, just a plate and a gasket to block that off. And the BMW throttle positioning sensor. I think if you're using a standalone, you can use any throttle positioning sensor, but the 99 plus Miata one, or any of the Miata ones, will bolt to this. With there's an adapter for the early 90s Miata throttle positioning sensor, and the normal or the later model throttle positioning sensor will just bolt right on without a adapter. Yep. That's not correct. That is correct. Alright, there we go. Well, with that, she's ready to go on the car. Alright, so here's a little modification that had to be made. This bottom bolt, it looked like all of these because it's drilled twice for the two different manifolds. So if this is going on a BP 05 head or engine, this one on this far end, the passenger side, it needs to be ground down. It needs to be ground down because, alright, so you get in here, this mount here, it's the engine mount. It makes contact with there. It's really close there in that last hold, so that's why that has to be ground off the manifold. That's why this needs to be ground off in order to clear. Alright, so here's the gasket that comes with it. The gasket's really more of a spacer, super thick. It's a phenolic spacer. Basically, it's a thermal insulator to separate the intake manifold from the hot cylinder head. So it may make a difference, probably not. I don't know. It came with it, so I'm gonna go ahead and use it. Also, you have to trim that last little, how they each have a double hole for the two different manifold mounting flanges. You have to trim the second hole off of the last one on the passenger side. So anyways, I'm going to work on getting these nuts on, and we'll check back in. Alright, so I got this thing on there. Alright, so I got this thing on. Everything fits. I just got one like major gripe, and I don't know if I'm really qualified to make this criticism because this design may be this particular way because of necessity. But the way the manifold is designed, the runners come off the head flange and like immediately dip down and then curve back up. Because of that, it makes the bottom bolt holes or bolts, nuts to get. It makes the bottom row of nuts insanely difficult to get on and tighten. They're just like you can't get a ratchet or an extension on it because the runner interferes. It blocks where the nut is. The nut's way up here and the runner's down here, so you can't. So you have to use like an opening wrench. I ended up using a where'd they go? Yeah, and it's so close to the runner that you can't even fit a gear wrench on there. Because I was hoping I could do that, and that wouldn't fit. But anyways, I got a set of these little guys. Came in very handy, and these offset wrenches came in very handy for putting this thing on. It may not be as much of an issue on the Miata. I don't know. I mean, I think the alternator's in the same place, the starter's in the same place. So basically what happens is the starter gets in the way of two of them. The oil filter is in the way of two more, and then the last one, the alternator, is in the way. So I mean, you can. It helps if you take the oil filter off. You can get your hand in there and kind of fumble them on. But still, it's just very difficult to get them on. If the runners just came straight out, or if they didn't dip down quite as far, you could just easily get a socket and an extension on there, and it would be 1,000 times easier, much like the stock manifold. But I don't know, perhaps the runners are the length that they are for some reason. I don't know. So a couple of mods I had to make is, I'm running the KA injection fuel pressure regulator, and it normally the line comes off this direction, and there's no room for it to come off in that direction. The stock regulator, I think, is basically the same type of setup, so maybe the Miata regulator is different and comes off at a 90 or something, but anyways, with the AN fittings and stuff, there's just no room, so I ended up having to flip it upside down and reroute the return line. I'm not a huge fan of that, but it's whatever. So yeah, I just gotta plumb some more stuff up, get the intercooler pipe connected and whatnot, and I should be ready for a test start. But I'll probably do the test start in the morning because it's 12 at night, and I don't want to piss off my neighbors. So another small thing I need to do is plug the port on the intake, or on the intercooler pipe, because the old throttle body had the had the old throttle or idle control valve that had an external pipe fed into it. So now I don't need that pipe, obviously, so I'm just gonna throw a big old plug. Yeah, so I've got the intake on. I've gotten the car to idle without a idle valve. That's not a big deal. The only issue I've ran into now is that the throttle tends to hang open. Like if you press the throttle softly and let off softly, it doesn't close all the way. I think it's just because the vacuum of the engine is enough to keep the throttle blade open. That shouldn't happen, and the reason why it's happening is because the spring on the Skunk2 throttle body is really weak. There's literally almost no preload on the throttle body when it's closed. So yeah, the issue is if you gently open the throttle and then let off softly, like you would if you're, like normal people drive cars, the throttle doesn't close all the way. You can see there's a little bit of, just a little bit. I mean, it's very minor, but it's enough that it's, yeah. So I think what I'm going to do after looking it up, a bunch of Miata owners have had the exact same complaint, that the throttle spring is way too weak. So what they end up doing is they pull this cam off here, and you can drill a new hole for the spring. You can see that there's no tension on there. There's zero tension on that spring. So yeah, so I think that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, pull the throttle body off and pull this cam off and re-drill it to add a little more tension to the spring so that the blade closes completely when you let off the throttle. There's literally no preload on that spring. That's how much preload is on there. I mean, that's nothing at all. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to drill a little hole further around. Oops, like further around, just to add a little more tension to the spring so that it's a little more loaded up. That should help keep the throttle body closed at idle. Something you shouldn't have to do. You'd think that the R&D department would have ran across this problem. I don't know. I don't want to shit talk them too much. I'm not an engineer. But for how much this stuff costs, you just would expect to not have to do stuff like this. So yeah, drilled a couple of holes just so I could try some different positions. I might just go for the most. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and get this back on the car, see how she does. So, new issue I've ran into. Even though I've increased the spring tension, the issue now is when it's hot, you can hear that lovely squeak. Something's all binded up in there. So, I figure that out. Totes annoying. It's really annoying when you're cruising around and you know, your car is idling at 3,000 RPM and everyone's looking at you like, what the fuck's wrong with that guy? Alright, so I'm gonna sit and play with this and figure something out. Alright, so the issue I'm having is the blade itself is binding, and I'm guessing once the car gets hot, that bind gets a lot worse. So, I don't know what to do about it. Alright, so what I ended up having to do is, basically, I can't figure out why it seems like the entire assembly has shifted over towards the lever side. But yeah, so if I looked through this with like light, you can you should be able to see light all the way around it. And you'll notice near the anvil, you can see light all the way around that side, but you can't see light all the way around this side. So what I ended up doing was basically just sanding the blade like in place, because it's the best I could do, just a small strip of sandpaper, and getting in there and just kind of clearancing the throttle blade ever so slightly, little by little. I was just going to take the blade out and see if I could shift the blade over, but these screws are, they're like centered in, they're like hammered in, so you can't get them out. Well, you probably could get them out, but you'd probably strip the threads trying to get them out, and I don't have a torque spit to fit that. So, that's why I went with trying to sand the throttle blade. So, I went ahead, sanded it, sprayed a little bit of lithium. It's not really lithium. Multi-purpose precision lubricant. Yeah, so anyways, I sprayed a little bit of lube in there. I don't know how that's going to do over time, but she ain't squeaking, she ain't sticking. Probably have to readjust idle because now there's a little more air seeping past that blade. Throw her back on, see how she does, and probably update you in a few weeks as to how it's holding up. But yeah, so that's basically it. I'm not going to bother going any further with this right now because I just don't feel like it. It's kind of annoying that I've had to go through what I've had to go through to get this thing to work. I mean, I know that it's not meant for this car, but stuff like this, stuff like the throttle body not being, you know, the throttle body binding and not having any preload on it, that's not my fault. So, and I understand that I probably could have whacked something out of place when I took this apart, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's possible. So that's why I was like, alright, I'll just go ahead and sand the blade rather than trying to send it back, because I did mess with it, I did modify it. So we'll see if it works. If I do have problems with it, I'll just buy one of the knockoff $50 Skunk2 ones and keep this as a trophy, as a lesson that I should have went with what everyone told me and just bought the eBay one for half the price, you know, or for an eighth of the price. But anyways, I'm gonna throw this back on, play with the car some more, and get this video edited and uploaded. So until next time. So I'm going to take her for a quick little spin. I'm not expecting to be able to feel a huge difference, mainly because it's all going to be on the top end, and the top end on this thing is just kind of bonkers. It's hard to, it's going to be hard to feel you know, a slight difference, unless it's a major difference. I got no idea. But I'm not expecting much, you know. This is something I'm expecting to see the results at the track or on the dyno, not necessarily on the butt dyno. Plus, it's kind of wet out right now because it's Florida and it's always raining, so I'm not expecting a whole lot. I probably won't even really get on it. Okay, so it was right about here that I noticed that I might have an issue. It's not a problem with the throttle body, but if you look close, you'll see that the tach is moving, but the speedometer isn't. So I decided to give it another test trip. Oh, that was definitely clutch.
That didn't feel like tire spin.